Have you ever watched someone's entire world collapse in slow motion, while everyone else just sat there pretending not to see? The gate agent's voice sliced through the cabin like a knife. "We need you to come with us." No emotion, no hesitation, just corporate authority in a crisp Navy suit. He didn't see her as a person, just another problem to be quietly removed. Every head in first class turned, pretending to scroll, pretending not to judge. The cabin had become a courtroom, and the verdict, already decided. He gestured toward the jet bridge, his wrist flicking like he was brushing away dust. She rose slowly, dignity fighting against disbelief. Out in the gray tunnel of the jet bridge, the air felt colder. The flight attendant, Olivia, stood there waiting, arms crossed, lips curved into the faintest, cruelest smile. The gate agent leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper that felt like a threat wrapped in courtesy. "Don't make this harder. We can have security remove you from the airport." The roar of the jet engines filled the silence. And in that moment, she realized they didn't just want her off the plane. They wanted her erased. Before we continue, tell us where you are watching from, and if this story touches you, make sure you subscribe because tomorrow, I have saved something extra special for you. To understand the earthquake that was about to shake an entire industry, to feel the moment everything shifted, we have to rewind, just 15 minutes earlier. The air in first class on the flight from New York to San Francisco was different. It wasn't just recycled cabin air. It was thick with the scent of quiet power. You could smell the expensive leather of the seats, the faint, crisp notes of aged whiskey from a glass clinking softly a few rows ahead. It was an atmosphere built on a foundation of unspoken rules and hierarchies, a place where multimillion-dollar deals were sketched on cocktail napkins and the fate of entire companies could shift between takeoff and landing. This was the world Madison Cooper had fought to enter, the world she now commanded. She settled into her seat, the plush leather sighing beneath her. Her simple, dark blue dress was a stark contrast to the parade of bespoke suits and designer labels that surrounded her. It was a deliberate choice. She didn't need to wear her power like a costume. She embodied it. Tucked securely inside her leather briefcase was the proof, a freshly signed contract worth $700 million. The culmination of a year of relentless work, sleepless nights, and strategic battles fought in boardrooms that looked just like this cabin. This flight wasn't just a journey. It was supposed to be a victory lap, a quiet moment of celebration before she landed and changed the landscape of Silicon Valley forever. Have you ever been in a place where you knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that you belonged, but the world around you seemed determined to tell you otherwise? A place where your accomplishments, your intelligence, your very presence felt like it was being put on trial by people who couldn't see past their own narrow assumptions. Madison felt a sense of peace settle over her, the low hum of the engines a soothing promise of the future she had built. She had earned this seat, this moment, this life. But she was about to be reminded that in some spaces, for some people, belonging is never guaranteed. It's conditional, and it can be revoked in an instant. That's when she felt a presence looming over her. It was a flight attendant, her name tag reading Olivia. She was a picture of corporate perfection, her blonde hair pinned back so tightly it seemed to pull at her temples, her red lipstick a perfect, severe slash against her pale skin. She wore a smile, but it was a hollow thing, a practiced expression that never came close to reaching her eyes. Her eyes were cold, dismissive, and they were scanning Madison from head to toe, taking in the simple dress, the understated jewelry, the black skin. The assessment was instant, and the judgment was clear. Olivia's posture radiated a kind of smug, borrowed authority, the kind wielded by people who have a little bit of power and a desperate need to use it on someone else. Her voice, when she spoke, was a weapon disguised as customer service. It was dripping with a practiced, condescending sweetness that felt more insulting than an outright slur. She began, drawing the word out. "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass." The request hung in the air, sharp and intrusive. Madison looked around. The man in the suit across the aisle wasn't being asked. The woman in front of her, reapplying her makeup, wasn't being bothered. It was only her. The question was an accusation in disguise. How did you get here? But what Olivia couldn't know was that this kind of challenge was nothing new to Madison. She had faced far more formidable gatekeepers in boardrooms and negotiations. This flight attendant was just a pawn in a much larger game. Madison met her gaze, her own expression unreadable, and calmly retrieved the pass from her bag. She handed it over, her movements measured, betraying none of the frustration simmering just beneath the surface. Did Olivia really think she couldn't see what was happening? Olivia took the boarding pass, her fingers barely brushing Madison's. She stared at it, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows furrowing slightly. She looked from the name, Madison Cooper, to the seat number 3A, and then back up at Madison's face. A flicker of something ugly crossed her features. It wasn't just confusion. It was disbelief, laced with a venomous thread of suspicion. It was a look of someone whose entire worldview had been challenged. A black woman in a simple dress. In this seat? Her mind couldn't compute it. It rejected the reality presented to her. And so, she decided to create her own. Her condescending smile morphed into a triumphant smirk. She had found the error. She had caught the imposter. Raising her voice just enough to draw the attention of the surrounding passengers, she made her announcement. "There's been a mistake," she declared, her tone now sharp with authority. "This seat is already taken." The low murmur of the cabin died instantly. The clinking of glasses stopped. Every head turned. Suddenly, Madison was on stage, the unwilling star of a drama she never auditioned for. The silent passengers became a jury of her supposed peers. Men in $1,000 suits, who moments before had been discussing mergers and acquisitions, now either stared with a detached, clinical curiosity or quickly looked away, their discomfort a form of passive complicity. The humiliation was a physical force, a wave of heat that washed over her, flushing her cheeks. But she would not give Olivia the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. She held the flight attendant's gaze, her own voice dropping to a dangerously calm, almost glacial tone. "There is no mistake." Her words were clear, precise, and absolute. They were the words of a CEO, a woman accustomed to her statements being treated as fact. But in this cabin, at this moment, her truth had no currency. Olivia simply shook her head, the triumphant smirk widening. She had all the power she needed, vested in her by a polyester uniform and a corporate manual. She ignored Madison's assertion completely, turning to signal toward the front of the plane. "We have a situation here," she called out, her voice ringing with manufactured urgency. She was no longer just a flight attendant. She was a protector of the cabin's sanctity, the enforcer of an unspoken code. Within moments, a gate agent appeared, a man with a tired expression and a demeanor that said he had no time for complications. He arrived not to investigate, not to mediate, but to reinforce. He looked at Madison, sitting calmly in her seat. He looked at Olivia, standing over her with an air of righteous indignation. And in that split second, he made a decision. He sided with the uniform. He sided with the system. Without asking Madison a single question, without even glancing at the boarding pass Olivia still clutched in her hand, he delivered the verdict. He said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "We need you to come with us." There was no negotiation. There was no discussion. Just a command. "We need you to come with us." Madison Cooper rose from her seat, her movements graceful and unhurried. She didn't have to look at Olivia to feel the flight attendant's smug satisfaction radiating like heat off pavement. The walk from seat 3A to the front of the plane was the longest 10 yards of her life. It was a walk of shame, designed to make an example of her. The cabin, once a space of quiet privilege, was now a gauntlet of silent judgment. Her perspective narrowed, the faces blurring into a sea of expressions. Some passengers stared with a cold, detached curiosity, as if watching a mildly interesting nature documentary. Others quickly averted their gaze, finding a sudden, desperate interest in their phones or the safety card in the seat pocket. Their silence was deafening, a collective choice to do nothing, to say nothing. And in that moment, the injustice of it all was crystal clear. In a cabin filled with people who ran companies, who managed hedge funds, who held immense power in their own worlds. Not a single voice spoke up. One polyester uniform held more weight than a CEO's boarding pass. One person's prejudice, backed by a corporate logo, was enough to nullify her success, her accomplishments, her right to simply exist in a space she had paid for. The stakes had escalated far beyond a simple misunderstanding. This was a public removal, a forceful declaration that she did not belong. The conflict was no longer about a seat. It was about her very identity. What does it feel like when the system you've mastered turns on you in the most public way imaginable? She stepped out of the luxurious cabin and into the cold, impersonal jet bridge. The heavy door hissed shut behind her, cutting her off. Olivia and the gate agent stood before her, blocking her path back to the terminal. They were the gatekeepers, and they had won. The low, powerful hum of the plane's engine vibrated through the floor, a constant reminder that her world was about to move on without her. The agent, his face set in a grim mask of professional duty, delivered the final ultimatum. If you don't cooperate, we'll have security remove you from the airport. It wasn't a request. It was a threat, plain and simple. Olivia stood beside him, her arms crossed, a faint, triumphant smile playing on her lips. They were so sure of their power, so confident in their victory. This is the moment where the system believes it has crushed you. They look at you and see only what their biases allow. They see a black woman in a simple dress, not a titan of industry holding a $700 million deal in her briefcase. And in their arrogant blindness, they have just made the biggest mistake of their careers. Because as the gate agent reached for the handle to the terminal door, ready to cast her out, Madison did not move. She didn't plead, she didn't argue. She didn't even flinch. A chilling calm, a focus as sharp and clear as glass, descended upon her. While they were focused on the small power of their uniforms and rulebooks, she was thinking about a different kind of power. The kind that reshapes industries. The kind that makes markets tremble. She slowly reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Her hands were perfectly steady. The gate agent paused, watching her with a confused, annoyed expression. He thought she was calling a lawyer, maybe a family member to complain. He had no idea what was coming. Her thumbs moved with deliberate speed across the screen, typing two simple words. A message that was not a plea for help, but a command. It's off. She hit send. The action was quiet, almost anticlimactic, yet it was the most powerful thing she had done all day. The gate agent let out a short, derisive scoff. You can make all the calls you want. It's too late. He turned away, satisfied that the problem had been handled. They thought she was defeated. They thought she was just another disgruntled passenger, a nameless, powerless problem they had successfully erased from their flight. But that two-word text wasn't a surrender. It wasn't a complaint. It was a launch code, a signal that would set in motion a chain of events so catastrophic it would bring an entire airline to its knees. They had no idea that her two words, traveling silently through the digital ether, had already reached a Silicon Valley boardroom and vaporized a $700 million deal. But what they also didn't know was that back in the cabin they'd just thrown her out of, someone else had just pressed send, too. A shaky, 30-second video of the entire confrontation was uploading to the internet, and its title was about to set the world on fire. Two messages were sent at the exact same time. One was a quiet, two-word command from Madison Cooper that silently erased a $700 million deal. The other was a shaky, 30-second video, uploaded from seat 5C by a passenger who couldn't stay silent. The title was simple, direct, and devastating. Flight attendant forcibly removes black woman from first-class seat she paid for. For a few minutes, it was just one video among millions, a tiny flicker in the vast, roaring furnace of the internet. Then, something happened. A spark caught. The video was shared by one person, then 100, then 1,000. It was like watching a digital wildfire ignite in real time. Within an hour, it was ablaze. Within 3 hours, it was an inferno. The hashtag exploded, a rallying cry for everyone who had ever felt unseen, unheard, or unjustly targeted. No one knew her name yet, but the internet gave her one, a symbol for the injustice they were all witnessing. The battle was no longer confined to the cold jet bridge of a single airplane. It had erupted into the court of public opinion, a battlefield where every share was a weapon and every comment was a verdict. And in this court, the airline was losing. Catastrophically. The conflict had escalated from a personal humiliation to a global referendum on corporate racism, and the whole world was the jury. Have you ever seen the power of a crowd turn its focus on a single target? The silent witnesses from the plane were now a global chorus of outrage. The video's comment section became a raw, unfiltered transcript of the world's anger. "I've flown with them for years, never again," one comment read, with 10,000 likes. "This is what racism in 2025 looks like," said another. People began sharing their own stories of discrimination at the hands of the same airline, a flood of painful memories that had been dismissed or ignored for years. Celebrities with millions of followers shared the video. Politicians released statements demanding an investigation. The airline's social media pages, once a carefully curated landscape of vacation photos and travel deals, were now a wasteland, overwhelmed by a tidal wave of fury. They tried to fight back, of course. A little after midnight, they issued a statement. It was a masterpiece of corporate non-apology, filled with empty phrases like "we are aware of the incident," and "we are conducting a full investigation." They promised to take matters seriously, using the kind of weak, legal-approved language designed to say nothing at all. But it was like trying to stop a tsunami with a paper towel. The public didn't want a statement. They wanted accountability. They wanted justice for the calm, dignified woman in the blue dress. The airline had completely, utterly lost control of the narrative. Every hour that passed, the story grew bigger, the anger grew louder, and the price of their mistake ticked higher and higher. The world was screaming for an answer, but the one person at the center of it all remained completely silent. While the internet burned, Madison Cooper was not giving interviews. She was not releasing statements. She was not participating in the outrage that was sweeping the globe in her name. She was, to the world, an enigma, a ghost at the center of the storm. And this silence was her most powerful move yet. Why? Because she didn't have to say a word. She had already lit the fuse with her two-word text. The viral video was the gasoline poured on the fire, and now all she had to do was wait and watch the world catch up. The public's anger was doing the work for her, creating a pressure cooker of public opinion so intense that the airline's corporate headquarters was about to crack. Her silence allowed her to become a symbol, a blank canvas onto which millions of people could project their own experiences with injustice, their own desires for a world where power is held accountable. They thought they had silenced her when they escorted her off that plane. But in reality, they had just given her the biggest microphone in the world. The corporate panic was just beginning, but they still had no idea how deep the trouble went. They thought they were dealing with a PR crisis about an anonymous passenger. They had yet to understand they weren't dealing with a passenger at all. They had just declared war on a titan. Inside the airline's gleaming corporate headquarters, in a department they called Brand Integrity, a junior PR manager named Ben was having the worst night of his life. His screens were a chaotic collage of trending topics, all flashing red. His boss was screaming at him over the phone to get this under control. Frantically, Ben cross-referenced the flight manifest with a blurry face in the video until he found her. Madison Cooper. He typed the name into a search engine, his heart pounding. The first result made his blood run cold. The website for a multi-billion-dollar tech firm. And there she was, the woman from the video, listed as Chief Executive Officer. A strangled gasp escaped his lips. That was bad. But then, his eyes darted to a press release open in another browser tab, the one announcing the airline's landmark $700 million partnership. His hands started to shake as he looked at the name of the partner company on the press release, and then back at the name of Madison Cooper's firm. They were the same. With a sickening, stomach-lurching certainty, he realized they hadn't just humiliated a passenger. They had publicly assaulted the CEO of their brand-new $700 million partner. The realization hit the junior PR manager, Ben, not like a wave, but like a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. CEO. The word pulsed on his screen in the cold, blue light of the monitor, seeming to burn itself onto his retinas. He scrambled back from his desk, the wheels of his office chair shrieking on the linoleum as he stumbled to his feet. He didn't use the phone. He didn't send a frantic email flagged with red exclamation points. He ran. He sprinted through the hushed, late-night corridors of the corporate headquarters, his dress shoes slipping on the polished marble floors. The air was stale, smelling of industrial carpet cleaner and burnt coffee, a scent he'd never noticed until this moment of pure, adrenaline-fueled terror. He burst into the office of a senior vice president, a man named Davies, without knocking, a cardinal sin in this temple of hierarchy. "Sir," Ben gasped, chest heaving, a wild look in his eyes. "The woman from the video. I know who she is." Davies looked up from a stack of damage control reports, his expression a mask of pure annoyance at the interruption. "Get it together, son. We're handling it. We're drafting a new statement." "No. So? You don't understand," Ben stammered, fumbling to pull up the website on the executive's massive, curved monitor. "Her name is Madison Cooper." Davies just stared, unimpressed by the name, waving a dismissive hand. "And did she have a pleasant flight before our people decided to throw her off it?" Ben's finger trembled as he pointed at the screen, at the title beneath Madison's picture. "And she's the CEO of Omnitech." The name hung in the air for a second, not quite registering. Davies' brain was still processing the problem on a small scale, one angry passenger, one viral video. Then, Ben clicked another link, a photo gallery from a recent tech conference, an event the airline had proudly sponsored. And there she was, the woman from the video, Madison Cooper, in her simple blue dress, shaking hands and laughing with their own CEO. A heavy crystal paperweight slipped from Davies' fingers and thudded onto his mahogany desk. His face, which had been ruddy with anger and stress, drained of all color. It went from pink to a sickly, pale white in a single, horrifying heartbeat. This wasn't an anonymous passenger. This wasn't some random customer they could silence with a flight voucher and a canned apology. This was one of them, a player in their own rarefied world, a titan they had just treated like a trespasser. That single, horrifying realization was a spark, and the corporate headquarters became a powder keg. Panic spread not like a wave, but like a contagion, leaping from office to office, from phone line to phone line. The news shot up the corporate ladder with breathtaking speed, each upward step amplifying the terror. We see it in a flash, Davies' panicked face on a video call to the chief legal officer, whose own expression hardens into a mask of grim calculation. Frantic emails fly, their subject lines screaming in all caps. "Urgent. Flight 815. Sea-level incident." A board member is pulled out of a dinner at a Michelin-star restaurant, his face growing grimmer with every whispered word from his aide. In the airline C-suite, the atmosphere curdled from controlled concern to outright terror. They had insulted a CEO. They had created a viral nightmare. But they still didn't understand the full scope of the catastrophe. They were about to. Miles away, in a sleek black car speeding through the glittering streets of San Francisco, another CEO was looking at his phone. Arthur Vance, the man who had been sitting in seat 2A, the man who had watched the whole ugly incident unfold with detached curiosity, now stared at a single, shocking notification on his screen from his legal team. Deal terminated. There was no explanation. Just two devastating words. A $700 million partnership, a deal that was supposed to define his company's next decade, had just evaporated into thin air. He felt a surge of white-hot fury, laced with the icy dread of shareholder lawsuits. He didn't call his lawyers. He didn't call his board. He called the one person he knew was responsible for the flight he had just taken. His thumb jabbed the screen, and moments later, the private line of the airline CEO was ringing. The call was answered with a professionally calm, "Hello." Arthur Vance didn't waste time with pleasantries. "What did you people do?" he roared into the phone. "I just got a notification that our deal with Omnitech is dead. The deal Madison Cooper was flying out to celebrate. You just cost us both a fortune." The stakes were no longer about bad PR. They were no longer about a viral video or an angry hashtag. This was about money. A catastrophic, company-altering amount of money. This was about financial ruin. The fallout from that one phone call was immediate and brutal. The airline's CEO, reeling from the verbal assault, unleashed his own torrent of fury downwards. The hierarchy began to crumble under the weight of pure, unadulterated panic. Executives were screaming at middle managers, who were screaming at the airport supervisors back in New York. They were no longer trying to solve a problem. They were trying to find someone to sacrifice, a scapegoat to feed to the wolves. The search narrowed with terrifying speed to the two people who started it all: the flight attendant, Olivia, and the gate agent who backed her play. Their employee files were pulled, every infraction, every note, every complaint suddenly magnified under the harsh glare of a $700 million mistake. They began a frantic, desperate deep dive, combing through their social media, looking for any hint of prior bias, anything they could use to paint them as rogue employees, as lone wolves. They were looking for one bad apple, a single, simple explanation for the disaster that was now engulfing them. But they were about to find out this wasn't about one employee's bad judgment. They had a systemic disease. They were looking for one bad apple, but Madison was about to prove the whole tree was rotten. The blame game was a useless exercise, and every executive in that building knew it. Firing a flight attendant wasn't going to magically restore a $750 million partnership. It wouldn't silence the global outrage. It wouldn't undo the damage. They were out of moves. They were completely and totally cornered, trapped in a crisis of their own making. As the hours bled away, the airline's CEO sat alone in his vast, silent office high above the city. The frantic shouting had finally stopped. All that was left was the heavy, suffocating weight of impending doom. He stared out the floor-to-ceiling window at the sprawling city lights below, a kingdom he suddenly felt was about to be taken from him. He stared at his computer screen, at the same professional headshot of Madison Cooper that Ben had found hours earlier. There was only one path left. One person who held all the cards. He had to call her. He had to face the woman his company had tried to erase. With a shaking hand, he picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over the contact number his assistant had just forwarded him. He thought he was making a call to beg for forgiveness. He thought he was about to enter a negotiation. He had no idea he was walking into an execution. Because Madison Cooper wasn't waiting for an apology. She was waiting to deliver an indictment. The call connected. The video feed flickered to life, creating a digital bridge between two worlds. On one side of this divide, in a cavernous boardroom paneled with dark, intimidating wood meant to project power and permanence, the CEO of the airline, Richard Hayes, sat hunched at the head of a long, polished table. The table's surface was so glossy it reflected the panicked faces of the half-dozen grim-faced lawyers flanking him like a dark, still lake. He had a sheen of sweat on his brow that the room's powerful air conditioning couldn't seem to touch. His hands, clasped before him, were trembling slightly. 4 hours, they had been wargaming this moment, rehearsing lines, anticipating attacks. Now, faced with the reality of it, all that preparation felt like building a sandcastle against a coming tide. He looked haggard and small, a king in a castle under siege, a man drowning in a crisis he couldn't control. On the other side of the screen, there was no team. There was only Madison Cooper. The contrast was a story in itself. She was not in a throne-like executive chair designed to intimidate. She sat in a simple, elegant seat in what looked like a minimalist, light-filled office. The wall behind her was a clean, unassuming white, with a single, vibrant piece of abstract art. The light from a large window cast a soft glow on her, making her appear serene, composed, almost ethereal. She was alone. She was perfectly still. Her expression was not one of anger, or sadness, or even triumph. It was one of chilling, absolute clarity. This was not a victim seeking an audience. This was a predator that had finally cornered its prey. Hayes cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the tense silence of his boardroom. He began with the fumbling, desperate apology he and his legal team had rehearsed, the words feeling like ash in his mouth. Ms. Cooper, Madison, on behalf of our entire airline, from the board of directors down, I want to express our most profound and sincere apologies for the unacceptable and deeply regrettable experience you were subjected to on Flight 815. The employees involved have been suspended without pay, pending a full and thorough investigation. I want to assure you, this is not who we are. This is not what we stand for. His words tumbled out, a pathetic cascade of corporate speak designed to placate, to minimize, to make the problem go away. He was speaking to her as if she were a victim, someone to be soothed with the balm of a carefully worded statement. He was catastrophically wrong. Madison let him finish, her eyes never leaving his through the camera. She gave him just enough silence after his speech to make every person in his boardroom feel the crushing weight of its inadequacy. The silence stretched for 5 seconds, then 10. It was an exercise in power, and she was the undisputed master. Just as Hayes was about to speak again, to fill the terrifying void, she raised a single hand. And she spoke one word. Stop. It wasn't a request. It was a command, delivered with the flat, emotionless finality of a judge's gavel. Hayes's mouth, which had been opening to offer more empty platitudes, snapped shut. The power in the virtual room shifted so suddenly it was almost audible. This isn't about an apology, Mr. Hayes, Madison continued, her tone unchanging, as cold and clear as a winter morning. Your apology is worthless to me. It is a tool, a pre-approved script you are reading to mitigate your financial exposure and your public relations nightmare. So let's be absolutely clear. We are not here to discuss my feelings. We are here to discuss your pattern. The word hung in the air, sharp and menacing. The lawyers on Hayes' side exchanged nervous glances. A pattern implies consistency. It implies intent. It implies liability on a scale they couldn't begin to comprehend. A pattern. Hayes finally managed to stammer out, his voice weak, a pathetic echo in his own grand office. Madison didn't answer with words. Instead, she shared her screen. A document appeared, filling the massive monitor in the airline's boardroom. It was a dossier, polished and professional, its cover emblazoned with the Omnitech logo and a simple, damning title, Systemic Bias and Customer Discrimination, a case study. While Hayes and his team had been panicking, Madison's team had been working. While the world was reacting to one viral video, they had been building an arsenal. While your PR team was trying to figure out who I was, Madison explained, her voice a calm, steady narration of the horror unfolding on their screen. My data science and legal teams were cross-referencing your company's entire history of customer complaints with publicly available demographic data. It took them less than 6 hours. She clicked, and a graph appeared on screen. This chart, she said calmly, shows over 200 formal complaints of racial discrimination filed against your airline in the last 3 years alone. And this number, she clicked again, highlighting a horrifying statistic in bright red, shows that 98% of those complaints were dismissed with no action taken, almost always with a form letter and a travel voucher. Your system isn't designed to solve the problem, Mr. Hayes. It's designed to make it quietly go away. She kept clicking. She brought up scanned copies of the complaints, with the names of the victims redacted, but their stories of humiliation laid bare for the executives to read. Complaint number 72. A black family with 2 small children, accused of having forged boarding passes for their premium cabin seats. Complaint number 142. A decorated military veteran, a black man in his 50s, repeatedly asked to prove he could afford his first-class ticket. She brought up internal memos, sourced from whistleblowers within his own company who had reached out to Omnitech in the last 12 hours. The memos outlined a corporate culture that actively protected employees like Olivia. Phrases like resolve with discretion and manage customer expectations to maintain cabin integrity were revealed to be coded language for profiling and dismissal. Is it just one person's prejudice, or is it a system that allows that prejudice to thrive? What happens when a company's entire culture becomes the real problem? The faces in the airline's boardroom were ashen. The evidence was irrefutable. They were staring at a portrait of their own rotten soul, and Madison Cooper had painted it for them in excruciating detail. One of the lawyers, a woman with a severe haircut and a steely expression, finally spoke up, attempting to regain some semblance of control. It was a fatal miscalculation. Ms. Cooper, while this data is concerning, these are clearly a series of unfortunate, isolated incidents, anecdotes that don't reflect the whole picture. Our training protocols are industry standard. We cannot be held responsible for the individual biases of every single one of our 30,000 employees. The law is quite clear on that. It was a classic corporate defense: deny, deflect, and diminish. It was the last mistake she would make on this call. Isolated incidents. Madison replied, her voice dangerously soft. She clicked her mouse, and the screen changed to a map of the United States, dotted with red pins indicating the location of each complaint. If they were isolated, the distribution would be random. But as you can see, there are significant clusters at your hubs in Atlanta, Dallas, and New York, the very airports with the most diverse passenger populations. This isn't random. It's targeting. She clicked again. And as for your industry standard training, a page from their own employee manual appeared, with a section highlighted. Your manual, Section 4, subsection B, encourages employees to identify passengers who do not appear to fit the first-class cabin environment. Can you please define for me, Mr. Hayes, what a first-class passenger is supposed to look like? The room was utterly silent. She had dismantled their every defense. She had used their own data, their own policies, their own words against them. The emotional conflict of the jet bridge had been transformed into a cold, intellectual execution. Madison leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking onto Hayes through the screen, ensuring he understood the gravity of what she was about to say. She made it clear this was never just about a seat. It was about an entire corporation's systemic failure to see her, and people who look like her, as belonging. Your flight attendant didn't have a bad day, Mr. Hayes. She acted on a prejudice that your corporate culture cultivated, validated, and protected. You didn't just fail me. You failed every single person of color who has ever paid for a ticket and was made to feel like they didn't belong. My humiliation was not an anomaly. It was the predictable, statistically inevitable outcome of the system you built and profit from. The lawyers had nothing left. Hayes stayed at his desk, utterly defeated, a broken man. Madison had proven the why. Now, she was about to dictate the what. She let the silence hang for a moment, the weight of her indictment crushing them. Then, she delivered the final, chilling blow. So, Mr. Hayes, we are no longer discussing your apology. We are discussing your company's atonement. And I have prepared a list of non-negotiable terms. The air in the airline's boardroom was thick with the silence of the defeated. Richard Hayes and his team of high-priced lawyers stared at the ghost of Madison Cooper's face on the dark monitor, her final words hanging in the air like a death sentence. I have prepared a list of non-negotiable terms. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a sentencing. Madison reappeared on the screen, her expression unchanged. She shared a new document, this one a clean, starkly formatted page with the Omnitech letterhead. The title was simple, Terms for Atonement. She began to speak, her voice a cold, deliberate instrument of justice, dissecting their company with surgical precision as she laid out her verdict. There would be no discussion. There would be no compromise. There would only be their compliance. First, she began, there is the matter of public accountability. Your press release will name the individuals responsible. Olivia, the flight attendant, the gate agent who enabled her, a Mr. Robert Henderson, and the JFK shift supervisor who reviewed the incident report and chose to classify it as a customer seating dispute, Ms. Carol Albright. Their employment with your airline is to be terminated, immediately and publicly. One of the lawyers started to raise a hand, likely to mutter something about employee privacy laws, but he stopped when Madison's cold gaze flickered to him. The hand went down. Second, she continued, is corporate restructuring. Your internal training is a failure. It is a shield you hide behind, not a tool for change. Therefore, you will be retaining the services of the Sterling Equity Group, a leading diversity and inclusion consultancy of my choice. They will conduct a mandatory top-to-bottom audit and implement a new anti-bias and de-escalation training program for all employees, from the baggage handlers to the boardroom. This will be implemented within 90 days. Third, public atonement. A press release is not enough. The public has seen the video of my humiliation. They need to see the video of your remorse. You, Mr. Hayes, will deliver a formal, public apology. Not from behind your desk. Not in a pre-recorded statement. You will appear on national television, in a live interview, and you will not just apologize for this unfortunate incident. You will read from a prepared statement, which my team will provide, admitting to the systemic cultural failures that my investigation has proven are rampant within your organization. Hayes visibly flinched, the personal humiliation of the demand hitting him like a physical blow. Fourth, Madison said, her voice dropping slightly, is financial restitution. An apology without action is manipulation. You will make a $10 million donation to the Travelers Justice Initiative, a nonprofit foundation that provides legal aid to victims of discrimination in the travel and hospitality industries. This donation will fund their work for the next 5 years, ensuring that the next person you wrong has the resources to fight back. She paused, letting the full weight of her demands crush them. Each term was a masterstroke, designed not just to punish, but to systematically dismantle the machine that had wronged her and to create lasting, public change. Finally, she delivered the killing blow, the ticking clock that would force their hand. These are my terms, she said calmly, her eyes boring into Hayes through the camera. My office will be sending this document to your legal team in the next 5 minutes. You have 24 hours to sign it and issue a press release announcing your full and unconditional compliance. If you fail to meet that deadline, or if you fail to meet it in its entirety, this video call, this entire dossier, and the full, explosive story of our terminated $700 million partnership goes to every major news outlet in the country. The clock is ticking, Mr. Hayes. Make your choice. And with that, her screen went black. Madison was gone, but her ultimatum remained, an oppressive force in the room. Richard Hayes slumped in his chair, looking like a man who had aged a decade in the last hour. The lawyers erupted into a frantic, hushed discussion, their professional calm shattered, replaced by the raw panic of cornered animals. We can't agree to this, one of them hissed. Letting her dictate our training partners. The public apology alone is corporate suicide. Another chimed in. The legal liability of admitting to systemic failure is. But the lead counsel, the woman who had tried to challenge Madison earlier, cut them off. She looked at Hayes, her face grim, all arrogance gone, replaced by the cold, hard certainty of defeat. Richard, they are wrong, she said, her voice barely a whisper. We have no choice. She laid out the grim reality with brutal efficiency. They had no leverage. Public opinion was a tidal wave that was already drowning them. The stock was projected to plummet at market open. Madison's dossier wasn't just a threat. It was a smoking gun, a meticulously documented case that would crucify them in any courtroom, to say nothing of the court of public opinion. A legal battle would be a protracted, public, and unwinnable disaster that would cost them far more in market capitalization and brand damage than Madison's terms ever could. She's not suing us, Richard, the lawyers said, the terrible realization dawning on all of them. She's dismantling us. We have no move. Our only option is to surrender. The room fell silent. The truth was undeniable. They were completely, utterly, and hopelessly beaten. The camera focuses on Richard Hayes, on his defeated posture, the utter despair in his eyes. He slowly, painfully, nods his head. The surrender was total. Later that night, a single, signed PDF was emailed back to Madison's office. It wasn't just a signature on a piece of paper. It was the unconditional surrender of a corporate giant to a single woman they had dared to underestimate. The mighty have fallen. The next day, the world saw the results. The news broke not as a trickle, but as a flood. It was a rapid-fire montage of consequences, a public shaming on a global scale. A news alert flashes on a phone screen. Breaking, airline terminates 3 employees in viral racism incident. CEO to issue live apology. The camera cuts to a clip of the humbled Richard Hayes on live television. He sits opposite a famous journalist, his face pale, his voice strained and cracking as he reads from a teleprompter, delivering the most humiliating speech of his life. We failed, he stammers, the words Madison's team wrote for him catching in his throat. Our internal culture has allowed for systemic cultural failings that we are now committed to eradicating. Another headline appears on a news website. In unprecedented move, airline partners with Sterling Equity Group for mandated bias training overhaul. Then another, airline donates $10 million to racial justice nonprofit after discrimination scandal. Every demand, every single term, met in full and broadcast for the entire world to see. Justice hadn't just been served, it had been televised. The world saw a corporation brought to its knees. They saw firings, apologies, and a massive donation. They saw a clear and undeniable victory. But what they didn't see, what no one could see yet, was the ripple effect that was just beginning. Because when you throw a stone this large into the quiet, murky waters of corporate power, the waves travel much further than anyone can imagine. In a rival airline's headquarters across the country, a senior executive watched Hayes' televised apology, her face a mask of cold calculation. She turned to her aide. "Get our PR and legal teams on a call," she ordered. Now, the apology was televised. The employees were fired. The $10 million check was written and publicly confirmed. To the world, the story seemed to be over, a neat, satisfying conclusion to a shocking drama. A clear, decisive victory had been won, justice had been served, and the news cycle, in its relentless, hungry way, moved on to the next fire. But the true impact of an event like this is never in the initial explosion. It's in the shockwave that follows. It's in the silent, invisible ripples that expand outwards, fundamentally changing the landscape long after the noise has faded. The real story, the one that would reshape an industry, was just beginning. In offices from Chicago to Dallas to Atlanta, emergency meetings were being called, the kind that happen on weekends and late at night. Richard Hayes' televised humiliation wasn't just a news story for them. It was a training video of what not to do. It was a terrifying glimpse into their own future. The stock market had opened that morning, and the effect was brutal. The airline stock had hemorrhaged value, a catastrophic drop that wiped out billions in market capitalization in a matter of hours. Business news outlets weren't just calling it a PR disaster. They were calling it a new paradigm in corporate risk, coining the term the Madison Cooper effect, a scenario where a single, well-documented act of systemic bias could inflict more financial damage than a fleet of grounded planes. A senior executive at a major rival airline, a woman known for her cutthroat business acumen, stands before her board. Her face is grim, her voice devoid of its usual confidence. She never sued them, the executive says, the realization dawning on everyone in the room. She didn't need to. She used our own tools, data, media, and public opinion to dismantle them. She turned their brand into a liability. The executive issues a directive to her team. "I want a full, independent audit of our customer de-escalation protocols, our complaint database, everything. And I want it on my desk by Friday. I will not be the next Richard Hayes." Another scene shows an internal memo being blasted out to thousands of employees at another carrier. Its subject line in all caps: mandatory refresher training on cultural sensitivity and implicit bias. They weren't acting out of a sudden surge of moral clarity. They were acting out of pure, calculated fear. Madison Cooper had done more than just punish one company. She had put an entire industry on notice. She had created a new benchmark for corporate accountability. The old playbook of deny, delay, and dismiss had been lit on fire. For the first time, the vague threat of a social media backlash had a concrete number attached to it: $700 million. And every CEO, every board member, suddenly understood. The power dynamic between the consumer and the corporation had been visibly, and perhaps permanently, altered. Months later, long after the hashtags have stopped trending, we find ourselves in the quiet, climate-controlled cabin of a different airline, on a different coast. A black family, a mother, a father, and a young daughter holding a well-loved teddy bear, are making their way down the aisle, looking for their seats in economy. A flight attendant with a warm, genuine smile stops them. She had seen the viral video. She had sat through the new, intensive training sessions. and she had felt a knot of shame for her industry. Now, seeing this family, she makes a choice. "Excuse me," she says kindly. "We had a last-minute seat change, and would like to offer you an upgrade to first class today, if you don't mind." The parents are surprised, grateful, their faces lighting up. There is no suspicion in the flight attendant's eyes. There is no condescension in her voice. It is a simple, human moment of kindness and respect, an active choice to create a better experience. As the family settles into the plush, spacious seats, the little girl looks out the window at the clouds, her eyes wide with wonder. It's a small scene, a quiet, unremarkable event, but it is the beginning of a new normal. It is the subtle, but profound, evidence of a cultural shift, a ripple of change born from one woman's refusal to be erased. And what of that woman? We see Madison back in her office, the same bright, minimalist space where she delivered her verdict. She isn't looking at spreadsheets or market reports. She's standing by the window, looking out at the city below, a landscape she has fought her entire life to conquer. Her expression is not triumphant, not celebratory. It is the calm, steady look of a person who understands the true nature of the battle she has just won. For her, this was never about revenge. Revenge is a fleeting, empty victory that satisfies the ego but changes nothing. This was about something far more permanent. It was about dismantling a system that was built to diminish people who looked like her. It was about fundamentally rejecting the unspoken rule that her success, her belonging, was conditional, something that could be granted and revoked by anyone in a uniform who had a bad day. It was about ensuring that the next black family, the next young entrepreneur, the next person who had earned their place in the world would not have their dignity put on trial at 30,000 feet. It wasn't about winning one fight. It was about rewriting the rules of engagement for all the fights to come. And that's how a two-word text message grounded prejudice and rewrote the rules of the sky. Madison's story proves that one person's courage, armed with intelligence and conviction, can challenge an entire system. But she couldn't have done it without the world watching, without that first passenger who chose not just to see, but to record. It raises a question for all of us. If you were on that plane, if you were a witness to that injustice, would you have stayed silent, or would you have hit record? These are the stories that need to be told, the moments that demand a spotlight. If you believe that injustice should never be ignored, that power should always be held accountable, then you belong here. Join the movement. Subscribe to this channel, and become part of a community that understands that our voices, together, are a force for change. Like this video if you believe in the power of standing up, and share it so this story can reach others who need to hear it. Because silence is always a choice, but so is courage.